Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 427, Ankh, Gods of Egypt. Dun, 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 dun.
Cool music.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
That's staying in there.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. And crap, already.
Started. Well, at least you remembered the .com. Logan was just Game Toppers LLC. So, glad you know that it's .com.
Game Toppers LLC is a .com. More than just virtual, they are amazing. They have such incredible products for you to use to improve your game room. Not just the game room, but every game experience. Go check them out. Get a Game Topper. Expand the surface area that you play on. Soften it with a nice mat. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com. They have so many things to go with those Game Toppers. All sorts of accessories. They just don't know where to stop, to be honest. And they keep coming out with more and more stuff.
It is definitely a purchase you will never regret making. I know that I love my toppers. Nathan loves his toppers. By far the best addition to our game rooms.
I keep hoping I'm going to get some bigger toppers. The Watsons work great. I just have Mycroft envy, I guess.
I understand that.
I would like to get at least one, because you can have those bigger games on one table and the games that don't normally take up as much real estate on the Watson.
You know, I think that's not a bad idea. I think it would be a great idea to have a table that's a little smaller so that those smaller games, you're not having to reach across the huge Mycroft to play the game. There are a lot of games coming out right now that really are just table hogs.
Yeah.
They take up so much space. So to have that 4 foot by 6 foot space, or even that 4 foot by 8 foot space with the leaf, you end up using all that space. That completely changed your experience with that particular game.
Absolutely can change that experience. Having that extra room, we talk about this every week. The Game Toppers are awesome. They make game night. We had our Hug a Meeple Con a couple months back. It had the opportunity to have 5 Game Toppers set up. It made gaming on any table great. Mycroft envy it's a real thing. Counseling should be available.
Easily solved.
Not easily. They're not the cheapest things.
No, they're not.
They are the best things that will enhance your game.
GameToppersLLC.com.
We are your hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I am Andy Holliday.
And I'm Dave Holliday.
Logan is working nights again, so he's not with us. But if you want to see Logan, jump on over to our website, MeepleNation.com. You can look at the blogs and see his bio. Check out his picture, and while you're there, check out the rest of us. We also have bios for our bloggers, Nathan Tinney, Doug Stewart, and Kit Howard. Check out their words, get a little bit of insight from them. Links to our Instagram so you can see all the pictures that we take. Honestly, isn't as much as it should be, but sometimes that's the last thing we think of when we're sitting down to play a game. But there's also links to every episode that we've released, from episode 1 to episode 426. You can check them all out. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out to us at meeplenation@gmail.com. Let us know games that you think are really cool that we talked about, or games that you think that we should talk about. Let us know. Also, if you go to our website, you will find a link to our Patreon site. Patreon allows us to expand some of our resources here, and we truly, truly appreciate those who have donated to our Patreon. Be grateful for any other support that we can get. It allows us to upgrade some of our technology and to increase the possibility of us doing more and greater things. So we would love your support, and that is on our main page, MeepleNation.com.
And on that note of doing more and greater things, let us know what more and greater things you'd like to hear and see from us.
Not everybody knows, but at the end of almost every episode, there's some bloopers. Anytime Dave does a sponsorship,
or opens his mouth in general,
there's almost guaranteed bloopers at the end of the episode. We love to give Dave a hard time as he struggles with the sponsorship that he's been doing for 2 years, but for some reason he just can't remember.
Deer in headlights.
So Doug, don't feel so bad. It happens to Dave too.
This week we are discussing Eric Lang's Ankh, Gods of Egypt. In Ankh, Gods of Egypt, you play as one of the gods of ancient Egypt, competing to survive as society begins to forget the old ways, so that only you and your followers remain. Build caravans, summon monsters, and convert followers in your quest to reign supreme in Ankh, gods of Egypt. Deities, monsters, and the people of ancient Egypt have been lovingly reimagined and interpreted in beautiful illustrations and detailed miniatures, and players will truly feel like gods as they shake the very foundations of Egypt. All gameplay in Ankh, including combat, is streamlined and non-random. Compete to win solely on your godly wits alone. So the first thing I noticed about this game, and probably the first thing anybody notices about this game when it comes out of the box, is the plastic.
These miniatures are amazing.
They really are. And you didn't get the Kickstarter version, and the miniatures are still just gorgeous. They are amazing.
We talked about this when we first even mentioned Ankh. We were at SalCon. I saw it on a table, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. I had ordered mine, but it hadn't shown up yet. Just as walking by, those sculpts looked really cool, and I was bummed that I was going to have this cardboard token, and I was excited to see these miniatures. For some reason, the one that excited me the most was the one that Corey was playing the last time we played, and that was Isis. Isis has these wings in this dramatic pose. Corey kept getting upset because I kept picking up his miniature to look at it. But I was just enthralled with the detail that was in these figures. I had sworn off CMON games after Blood Rage because I couldn't get Kickstarter exclusives. I find myself now that I don't necessarily need those to enjoy a game. If you don't play with it, then you don't miss it. But I guess that was my problem with Blood Rage, as I'd played with that Kickstarter content. But I was excited to get this content. There's some expansions that are available out there for non-Kickstarter users. If you go to your local game shop, you should be able to find this and some of the expansions and enjoy this game. The miniatures, like you mentioned, Andy, and I'm totally sorry I cut you off. I was just super excited.
No, that's fine. No, both of us felt the same way. As soon as we pulled the game out, we were both like, oh, wow.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
And to have it in a non-Kickstarter version, I was impressed with that.
Looking at in the Kickstarter version, there definitely are upgraded components, but I'm really glad that the gods themselves, the gods that came in the Kickstarter, they had that in the regular retail version as well. It's amazing the level of detail they have in miniatures now. It just seems like every new game that I see that comes out, the sculpts get better and better and better. Ankh definitely did not disappoint in that front.
Absolutely agree with that.
Ankh has a 90-minute playtime, 2 to 5 players. We played with 3 players. There were 3 of us, and that seemed to flow pretty well with 3 players. I know in a lot of our games that we've been playing recently, it seems like 5 players really seems to bog the game down. We've kind of talked about it with several different games, that even though a game can play 5 players, doesn't necessarily mean that it should. I don't know if Ankh falls into this category, but we played with 3, and it seemed to flow nicely.
That player count is always something that is a frustration, because sometimes you have those games that are 4 players and you have 5 people show up. I always appreciate a game that has 5 players and even up to 6 players. But yeah, you're right. Some of those games, the higher player count doesn't necessarily mean a better game.
I'm to the point almost where it's, if we get 6 players, I'd rather split up into 2 groups of 3 and play 2 separate games. Even if we found a 6-player game, it's almost always a better experience for everyone just to split up.
Yeah, you don't want to pull a George Lucas where you put it in there because you can, not necessarily because you should. It doesn't make it necessarily a better product, but you wanted to put it in there because you could.
True that.
And I agree with you on that front, totally. We just played Isle of Cats 6-player the other night. And
how long did that take you, Dave?
I have no idea. That game went on forever. There was a lot of commotion, and there were several new players. And we did have to re-explain drafting and how drafting worked a few times. It took way longer than it should have taken. Totally down with splitting and doing that. My big ask there is just don't make me play the lame game. Let me play the cool one.
You are the lame game, Dave.
So I was surprised when we played this, Nathan, that I enjoyed it as much as I did.
Because it's an area control game.
It is.
Both you and I are anti-area control guys as a favored mechanic.
For sure.
Does anybody love area control?
A lot of people thrive on it.
I know. It just seems like none of us do. But then we get games like this that we're like, well, we have to try it because it looks so stinking cool. Then we discover, you know what, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
That was actually pretty good.
I have to dial it back because I've complained that I don't like area control games. And then we did a list of area control games, and there was quite a few games on there that I very much enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
When I say I don't enjoy area control games, it's that direct face-to-face conflict. Risk comes to mind right off.
Yeah, for sure.
You have the ability to have two people team up on you and eliminate you. I think Eric Lang did a really good job with this game, eliminating player elimination in a player elimination game. Does that make sense?
To a point. There is a little bit of player elimination kind of towards the end of the game. It is possible for a player to get eliminated, but not guaranteed. You hit a certain point in the game. On the devotion track, there's devotion that has a red ring around it and devotion that has a blue ring around it. And you hit a certain point in the game, and anybody who's in the red is out. Those left continue playing. In our play, we didn't experience that at all. We all managed to get into the blue in time to not get eliminated.
Right, and you mentioned that happens at the end of the game. I mean, it happens, and there's maybe 20 minutes left in the game at that point.
Yeah.
So it's not the end of the world, Dave, go in the other room and play on the Xbox. It allows for that player elimination, but it's not a heavy part of the game. Going in that same line, they have another kind of player elimination that we did experience, Andy. And that is when the event marker gets to its third position, and we'll come back to the event marker. The two lowest players in a 3-player game or higher, those 2 players that are in last place are going to merge. You and I did, Andy, in the game that we played against Corey. I was the lower player, so I felt like became a cheerleader for Andy. Mm-hmm. And we did have some discussion, right? We came up with some motives that ultimately won us the game against Corey. But for me, anyways...
You saw everything you worked for the whole game go away.
Absolutely, yeah. And it all went over to your control. Everything I had went over to your control. I got to give you advice, but I felt like I was just watching the game.
When that happens, we still take our turns, but during your turn, you get 2 actions normally throughout the game. Once that merge happens, we still keep our turn order, but you would get 1 turn and I would get 1 turn. Still have some control over what happens. I think
some involvement.
I mean, you still take a turn. It's just maybe not a full turn for both the players that end up merging. I do think that we did a good job in the battles, communicating and figuring out exactly which cards we wanted to play and when to play them, which ultimately I think is what won us the game.
I think you are correct. So we kind of jumped to the end of the game. Maybe we should rewind that and start at the beginning. The basic game board is divided up into 3 sections. And depending on some of the scenarios, there's a scenario book that comes with the game. You may alter that game board setup. They have what are called camel caravans or caravans you can use to divide a section on the board. When you do that, that becomes a 4th section. Limitations to that, each section that you divide has to have at least 6 hexes in it. Other than that, you can essentially divide it any way you want. Most of them are going to go from like a river or an edge to separate that. There's another mechanic that will allow you to add 6 camels in a caravan. And again, that's going to be the same thing. It's going to go from an edge to a river or something like that. Because you can't leave a partial division. You have to be able to break up a whole area. And each of those new areas have to have at least 6 hexes in it.
I really liked this mechanic. Definitely made the game more strategic. When you are taking your turn, there are 4 different action tracks. You get to do 2 actions on your turn. You have to take your actions from the top to bottom. You can't go from the bottom to the top. So if I take the first action, which is move figures action, if I take that first, then the other 3 actions are still open to me. However, if I choose to gain followers, I can't, for my second action, go back up to one of the actions that are in one of the upper rows and perform that action. Perform a lower action, I can only perform an action lower than it. Not only that, there are end spaces on each of these tracks. When you take an action, you move the token along on that track.
And that's a shared token.
It is, yeah. So this is just on a general board that everybody, when they take an action, they move that token. If that token ever gets to the end, then you're going to move the event marker 1 space. If you do that on your first turn, your turn ends. You don't get your second action. Moving that token can be extremely strategic. It's going to potentially give you some sort of benefit. Now, that's how you can add the camels for the caravans, so that you can maybe separate a region and can separate a region where you already have a lot of figures in a specific region. Maybe another player has more plastic on the board than you. You can separate that out and actually get to where you can score more points. I liked that aspect of it. I liked the strategy of deciding when you want to actually move that token to the end. You could kind of see everybody's kind of strategizing when they would take their actions on what actions to take just because of that mechanic. You have to take them from the top to bottom. You want more than one action. You're trying to optimize. Man, I really want to move that event marker on the event track. Is it worth losing an action to gain that benefit? One of the benefits you can get is you get the tied battle token. When there's a battle, if you have that token and you tie a person for a region, you can flip that over. It basically makes it so you win the tie for that particular battle. A lot of strategy involved, I think, and I think that he did a really good job with that board in particular. I thought was very well done on the way that mechanics worked on it.
I agree. As all the players are going, we're trying to move those tokens to, like you said, maximize those turns to be able to take those 2 turns. But at the same point, if you get to advance that event marker, that is a huge benefit for you. You have the option to get that tiebreaker. You can control the monuments. You can build those camel caravans. Also on that event track that we talked about prior to is the last 2 players will combine and the elimination of any players that are still on the red in the devotion track.
You may want to trigger a battle when it's optimal for you and you've positioned your people in the correct position you want for that battle when it starts. There's definitely a lot of strategy into which actions you're going to take, even if it may not be an action you necessarily want to take, but getting that event marker moved, sometimes it's worth taking that action. You wanted to do something else on your turn.
Control a monument. When that event is triggered, the player who triggered that will get to take control of a monument that their figure is adjacent to. Scoring devotion, whoever has the most in a region, controls the most monuments, is going to gain some of that devotion to get you up the track. But triggering those events, you want to do that when it's benefiting you, when you have your figures placed there, that becomes key. Going back to that, you want to be able to move the action tokens along that track, but you also want to be able to make sure that you're the one, hopefully, advancing that event track so you can get those benefits as well.
The last track that's on there is unlocking Ankh powers. So everyone has a sheet that shows all the available god powers. You have 6 Ankh tokens at the beginning of the game. 2 that correlate to 3 different regions on powers. As you unlock these, you'll take the token off and put it over a power you want. There's 3 different columns. Each column will have 4 different god powers. Honestly, this is my one complaint about the game. I was hoping when I saw the different gods and everything, I was really hoping for some asymmetrical god powers. Unfortunately, all the god powers are the same.
Each god does have an asymmetrical power.
You're right.
We go back to those 2 that merge, you get to have both of those powers.
Which can be huge, right?
Yeah. But as far as the player boards and the Ankh powers, yeah, they're all identical.
He could have knocked this out of the park thematically by adding some asymmetrical for all the Ankh powers, matching the theme of each of the gods. I think that would have been a very nice touch if that would have happened. That being said, the god powers are really cool. Unlocking those is amazing. There's also a benefit to moving those Ankh tokens up to unlock god powers. When you uncover a scarab, you gain a guardian. That scarab unlocks different guardians. So there are going to be 3 guardians in the game. Those range from the giant scorpion, the mummy, cat mummy. We had cat mummies in, and the regular mummies in, and the sphinxes in. Is that correct, Nathan? I believe that's what we had in our game.
Yeah, that was it.
I thought they were cool. Also, interesting about the fact that it was you and I that merged. We had a lot more guardians than Corey did. So when we merged, we had basically our pick of what we wanted to bring to the table and to keep in the game.
Yeah, ultimately, I think that was Corey's downfall, is that we had those guardians and he had none.
If you end up merging and you have too many guardians, then you have bases to put on the bottom of your guardians of your color, then you have to choose which ones you're going to keep. The other ones don't necessarily go back to the supply. They're actually out of the game. Once someone has gained that guardian, a player gets eliminated. Whatever those players don't end up keeping as far as their guardians is also removed from the game. Let's talk a little bit about battles.
During the game, there's going to be an opportunity for 5 battles. Battles are resolved in each of the regions. Each of the regions have a number, 1, 2, or 3 at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of most of the scenarios. However, when a caravan separates a region, a new number is going to be placed out there. Whichever player places that last number has that opportunity to move that number wherever they want. And that's beneficial because you're going to resolve those battles in order. If you can arrange a battle, especially towards the end of the game, that will reach you to the end of the devotion track, if any player ever reaches the end of the devotion track, they win. And that's the only way that a player can outright win. before reaching the end of the event track. Towards the end of the game, that may become an advantage where you want to arrange which battles are going to occur first, which is also something that Corey tried to do and had a battle occur that caused us to win.
We jumped ahead of him. He was ahead of us even throughout most of the end game, and right at the tail end, we jumped ahead of him and ended up winning that way. It came down to the fact that we were able to resolve one of the regions that we were doing exceptionally well in before he was able to score the points and get up, because it was really close by the end, and we just managed to score the points in order to win before he did.
When the event track goes along and it hits this battle token, then the player who triggered that is going to take that event token, and then that event token will allow them to break a tie during the battles. And like I mentioned, battles are going to resolve in numerical order. During that combat, players are going to be able to add a card from their hand. Each figure that is in that region is going to give them 1 point. Each player is going to have a hand of 7 identical cards, and they will allow them to have some special events, and will also allow them to add some power or add some strength to their army in order to hopefully boost them up to win a conflict. Or if they're thinking they're not going to win a conflict, then they can just get the benefit. And then these cards are spent and they're face up until you play the cycle of Ma'at, which will allow you to scoop up your cards, all your battle cards, and add them back to your hand. The game we were playing, I had Amen, which would allow me once per conflict round play 2 battle cards, which would allow me to play a stronger card and then also play that cycle of Ma'at and scoop up those cards so that the next time I was in a battle, again, I had all my battle cards that I could use.
Yeah, you used that very effectively. And that's one of the ways you can build a monument is by playing one of those cards. So being able to boost your strength and gain the benefit of one of the cards that can be really beneficial but doesn't give you any battle strength, that was a great god power.
And there's other cards in here that will allow you to gain followers, and followers are what allow you to pay for Ankh powers. And some of them you're going to spend as currency to be able to fuel those powers. And some of them will increase your army strength. Some of them will give you benefit depending on the territories in that area you're having combat in. The drought will give you a reward for each figure you have in a desert spot. The floods will gain you a follower for each figure you have in a fertile or a green space. And then there's the Plague of Locusts, which is the one that you like to use, Andy. All players in the region simultaneously bid followers and sacrifice them and kill all figures here except for those of the player who sacrificed the most followers.
I don't know why I liked playing that card, because I never had more followers than you or Corey. It was really dumb of me to play that card, but I always hoped that you guys would try to retain some of your followers, but I usually got beat by one. So, yeah, probably not the smartest strategy. Hey, we still won.
We did. There's a battle and there's no figures in there, no resolution. There's nothing happening there. A conflict zone that has only one color, they're going to dominate the land. They win and they'll gain devotion from that. If there's more than one player in that region, then they're going to have that battle that we've kind of already talked about. If there's domination, that player will gain 1 devotion for each monument majority they have in that area. 3 monuments. There's obelisks, temples, and pyramids. If you have the majority of all those in an area that you dominate, then you have the opportunity to gain 3 devotion. If there's multiple players, you're going to go through the cards that we talked about. You're going to build monument, resolve plagues, the monument majority. And the first player to have monument majorities, each player is going to gain devotion there. Then players are going to compare their total strength. If they have the majority, they'll gain a devotion, and they will kill all enemy figures in that region, which kind of sounds devastating, but is actually fairly easy to recover from. 2 of those 4 actions is you can deploy troops, you can move your figures, summon figures, gain followers, and unlock those Ankh powers. And when you summon figures, it's pretty easy to bring those figures right back that you've lost.
Thinking about that last battle that we played, as we discussed, you and I both merged, Nathan. We had both of the Sphinxes, the only 2 Sphinxes available in the game. Enemy figures that are adjacent to the Sphinx don't count their strength during battles. We kind of horked Corey over with the Sphinxes in that last battle. I think he totally forgot that that's what the Sphinxes did, and I think he had made plans to win the battle and forgot he wasn't going to count some of his strength from some of his figures.
Well, he worked really hard to try to get his characters away from the Sphinx, so he was aware of that, but it just didn't quite work out like
That's right.
he
There
wanted.
was something else he forgot, that he's like, oh yeah, I forgot that did that, and I can't remember what it was. The one area of the region that he was going to score a ton of points, we ended up beating him on. Overall, I thought it was great. We mentioned I played Osiris. I would have liked to have the god powers be unique to each god. That being said, each god does have one unique asymmetrical power. Osiris's was interesting because you want to lose battles at the beginning of the game. Whenever you lose a battle, you get to put an underworld token somewhere on the board. And whenever you summon figures, you get to summon an extra figure and put it on the underworld space. If you can spread those out throughout the regions, it allows you to spread out a lot faster. Then you can start moving your figures, and all of a sudden the world's open to you far faster when you have those underworld tokens. And then nobody put figures on those tokens. Nobody can take them from you.
Nobody can build anything on that?
Nothing. They're yours. There's a lot of strategy involved with the asymmetrical powers that are there, which once again is well done. I like the added element of strategy involved with that.
I liked it too. We mentioned that this was kind of an area control game. It didn't take away from the game at all for me. One thing I do like is the way that the game ends. You either reach the end of the event track, and if you reach the end of the event track, whichever player is in the lead wins. Or if one player gets to the end of the devotion track, then they can end the game before the event track is concluded.
One other thing to note, when you're resolving battles and resolving the regions, if I'm not mistaken, when multiple players are gaining points, the players that are lower on the devotion track gain points first.
Correct. Which could be big.
Yeah, that can push you over to the top and win the game. If you're losing, that can jump you up and potentially get you into that last spot on the track.
Which goes back to that, you want to arrange those battles so that they resolve in the order that is most favorable to me. Whether I'm in the end of the devotion track or at the lead of the devotion track, I want it to be most favorable for me. Arranging those numbers can be huge.
I thought it was a fun game. Went into it with very low expectations, like we discussed, it being an area control game. Came away being very pleasantly surprised. I really quite enjoyed it. The miniatures, like we said, are top-notch. They're beautiful. I think it's well done.
I totally agree. Sworn off CMON games. I bought this because, honestly, it looked really, really cool. And I was pleased. Look forward to playing the game. Dave, thanks for being with us tonight as Andy and I discuss this game. Let's see if we can include you in this, because I think this is a game that you will really like.
I agree. I think Dave would really enjoy this game.
Watching the video, watching how it's played, listening to you guys, it seems like one... Well, it already seems like one that I want to play just because of the awesome components. It's one that Will was going to teach us at BryceCon, but we didn't get to it. Going through all this, it still sounds cool, so I'm excited to do it.
All right, let's pack it up and let's get it to the table.
Until next week.
We'll see you in the desert on a horse with no... Oh, sorry, that's wrong thing. Fighting with the ancients and becoming the god of Egypt.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter, @MeepleNation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Rating Detergent for our music.
give it that extra son of a gun.
That extra son of a gun.
Today we're talking about what Great Western Trail.
And I'm Andy Holiday.
You're just waiting again to talk about that, aren't you? Just for that very thing.
Well, son of a gun.
Well, golly.
Gee willikers. Main page, Meeple Nation at Gmail.
And interpreted in beautiful...
And tune in for Andy's description of the game.